Thank you so much, Taxamica, Pierre and Alice. And it's thrilling to be here for day 2 of iGaming Next Online. My name's Oisin Lunny. I'm an event MC, a podcast host, a marketing consultant, and some other bits and pieces. Feel free to reach out on the socials or visit oisinlunny.com. Now, we are now going to talk about a very, very important issue, not just for the iGaming sector, but for every sector. 5G has been one of the most important innovations in the world of technology, certainly this decade. And it's been touted to revolutionize everything from eye surgery to remote working to enjoying HD media and video on the move. But what does 5G mean for the iGaming sector? Is 5G a solution in search of an iGaming problem, or will it transform the industry? Could 5G accelerate player engagement beyond $100 billion? Joining me today to discuss this fascinating issue are two very well-connected gentlemen who have some profound experience and expertise in the overlap between telecommunications, networks and iGaming. Please welcome to the iGaming Next Online stage, Stuart Godfree, who is the Managing Director at Mkodo. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you very much, Oisin. Lovely to be here.
Great to see you, Stuart. And welcome to the stage, my old friend Justin Bellinger, who is the Chief Digital Officer at Shure International. Welcome, Justin.
Hi, Oisin. How are you? Good to see you.
Great to see you, man. Well, listen, thank you both so much for joining us. I sort of teased the audience there and said you both had profound expertise and experience, and that's completely true. But it's probably best if you relay this story in your own words. So, Stuart, do you want to tell our delegates at iGaming Next Online a bit about your background, how you got to where you are, and what it is you do that sits at this overlap between communications, networks, and iGaming?
Yeah, sure, of course I can. So I'm the Managing Director of Mkodo. Mkodo is a mobile app and mobile-first website development organization, predominantly in the betting and gaming and lottery industry. We've been in operation 20 years. I've actually been working in the mobile and telecom space for nearly 30 years. That kind of dates me. I'm probably one of the oldest people in this conference. I actually started off in the telecom space, actually in the SMS area, way back in fact, when the first Nokia phone, for those of you who probably don't remember, but Nokia came out with a phone that had this rather funny feature in it where you could send a message to somebody else with a Nokia phone. Those of you who do remember that, happy days. And I was actually in a restaurant in Paris, texting a colleague who had just received their Nokia 3510 or something. I can't even remember what the model was now. And that was when I first started to realize that the mobile phone wasn't a telephony device. It was something a lot more than that. And so I've been in that industry and working in that space basically since 1996. So that's my background.
Awesome. I'm a huge fan of SMS myself. I worked in a significant SMS company, and we worked with some of your colleagues at Mkodo back in the day. I think it's an incredibly powerful medium, but that's another topic for another time. Justin, coming over to your good self, tell us a bit about your very interesting background, because you really have this overlap between networks, telecommunications, and the iGaming space.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the industry in more or less the same company since the late 90s. So we built the internet backbone for the islands that we serve. I live in Guernsey, but my stomping grounds, Guernsey, Jersey, Isle of Man, and a few other bits and bobs, Falkland, South Atlantic, Diego Garcia, used to be Macau, used to be Panama. So our intro to the iGaming sector was in the late 90s. We were hosting companies under the Alderney licensing regime. That moved to Guernsey a few years later. So really been around right since the precursor to Sporting Bet had a 256k connection to the internet, and that's how they serve their customers. So the overlap between, well, there is no overlap. Telecoms and iGaming are intrinsically linked. So without a communications network, you can't get your product, your intellectual property out to your customer base. So we've been building solutions as an industry that cater for the really high demand that iGaming places on our network. It's very different to most other types of e-commerce, and it's very different to most other types of enterprise connectivity, because you need to guarantee uptime and you need to guarantee that really low latency. So we've been building stuff for that for a long, long time. So I've dipped in and out the industry. on and off since the late 90s. Gig Montreal, different conferences here, there, and everywhere. So I'm thrilled to be asked back. Thanks, Richard.
Ah, fantastic. Great story there. Very interesting point about the overlap between iGaming and telecommunications. It's a Venn diagram that's basically a circle. One doesn't really exist without the other. So I just wanted to point out to our delegates, we are completely live. If you have any questions for Stuart and Justin, put them in the chat window or the Q&A, and they will be conveyed to us, and we'll do our best to address them. And if we don't, I'm sure Justin and Stuart will be happy to answer them directly by email or on LinkedIn or something else like that. So anyway, let's come back to the main topic, which is, of course, 5G. I'd be interested to get your take on what impact do you think 5G is going to have in the world at large? So not just in iGaming, but, the whole shebang. Starting with yourself, Stuart.
It's really interesting because I've been looking at this, obviously from my background, I have a real interest in mobile. And I think one of the really interesting things is what was the penetration of 4G? So 4G has been the penetration has been quite sporadic. Some of it's been really, really good. Some countries have done an excellent job at deploying 4G based technologies, and others have been not so good. And some of the rationale behind that is they've been waiting for 5G. But I think what we're actually going to see with 5G is a much more significant and deeper penetrating investment by the mobile operators for several reasons. One is that the underlying technology of 5G actually helps the operator. I've lost screen, so I don't know if I've disappeared. Oh, okay, I'm back.
No, you're back. You're back in the room.
Yeah, I'm back.
3,
I'm
2,
back
1.
in the room. But I think the investment that I think a lot of the mobile networks, and this is probably something that Justin can actually speak to better than I am, but they've been waiting actually for this more transformational technology to come out. For 4G to some degrees has been a bit of a sticking plaster type of thing. But we are living in a very, very much more connected world now, more than anything. And I think actually the pandemic has demonstrated it just by virtue of this particular conference. Is a really good example of how technology has suddenly transformed the way that we do business, but also how we do commerce. There was actually something on the news this morning about and it's not particularly surprising, is it really? But online retail has gone up fourfold over the last 12 months. It's no surprise, really, is it? But the only way you can buy anything has been sort of through Amazon or whoever other retail outlets do exist. But the point I'm trying to make is that we're becoming more and more connected. And in fact, if you think about it, if we had a pandemic like this 10 years ago, the world economy probably would have suffered astronomically worse than it did today, because pretty much everybody has some form of networking at home that allows them to communicate with people, i.e. broadband. But what 5G offers us potentially is something beyond fixed line broadband. And I think that's where it's going to be really, really exciting. It's going to mean we're going to be in a much more connected world, irrespective of whether that's iGaming or whatever. But bear in mind now, we consume the majority of our private commerce through our mobile device, not our laptop or our desktop. The majority of people iGame on a mobile device. Anything that facilitates better connectivity surely is going to benefit that industry.
Yeah, well said. As The Economist coined the phrase, we have evolved into a species of Phono sapiens. Anything we can do on our mobile devices, we absolutely do. And, the fact that e-commerce has gone up fourfold since last year. At the beginning of last year, it did more growth in 3 months than it did in the previous 10 years. So we're really talking about an exponential growth curve there. But Justin, coming over to yourself, what does 5G mean to you in terms of its impact on the world? And that can include iGaming, of course.
I agree with Stuart. We're going to see a different rollout here. We're going to see certainly at the moment the way most of us are experiencing 5G is filling in the cities, filling in the gaps where density is required and network congestion is apparent. But let's look at how we would normally go about building a new mobile network. If I was going into any country or territory, first thing we do is we pick up the central business district. That's where we're going to get the most. Then we build corridors from there to like the airport or on railway tracks, etc. So normally when we're rolling out a new network technology, we're going to pick up the city, pick up the commute, pick up the roaming traffic as it comes into the territory. What we're going to see with 5G, though, much the same as you've seen mobile technology in areas that aren't wired, so spots of India and Africa, we'll see 5G as a direct replacement for areas that are not fibered up. So fiber not spots. So as a alternate investment to more remote areas and really dense areas. So certainly that's what, through our trials, we were looking at 5G as a direct replacement to fiber. As it happens, we're going to be rolling out fiber in the meantime anyway, because you need that to power your mast. But I agree with Stuart. It's going to, in the iteration that we're seeing right now, which does rely on a 4G bit of infrastructure to keep it going, in the main part, that's going to change, and we're going to see this infrastructure replace fiber investment in some areas, definitely.
All right, fascinating. And you mentioned some potential use cases there. Coming back to yourself, Stuart, talk to us a bit about how you think 5G might change the iGaming industry. Are there any particular, quick win use cases, or is it too early to say? What's your take on iGaming and 5G?
Yeah, fundamentally, with any sort of iGaming type of product, you just want bandwidth, don't you? You just want a super fast responsiveness. One of the things that we find when we develop our apps for our customers is the thing that kind of annoys the end user is any form of latency. They want, and a lot of the products now have a combination of video streaming or some sort of real-time live video feed. Whether it's a sporting event, lots of the sporting apps that we have now have complementary video streams. And one of the interesting things about particularly 4G technology and prior to that 3G technology was the tear up and tear down performance of the connection. In other words, how quickly your mobile phone could establish a network connection, an IP network connection, and then how quickly the network operator would tear that down if you're not using it because they want to use it for some other person. And so you get this kind of you get people fighting each other for capacity. And part of the value of 5G is that it's got and will have an extraordinarily fast process to establish the connection. And the idea is it's not always on, but it creates a connection so fast that you think you're permanently connected. And equally, when it tears it down, it's incredibly fast, but that's great because when it reestablishes it, it's really quick. So what that actually means to the end user is they see very little, if no latency. So they go to their mobile phone, they put some information and boom, they get the data instantaneously. It's like they were connected to a fiber broadband connection of a gigabit and beyond at home. So the improvement to user experience is something that we're really looking forward to. The movement of data will be so much quicker and so much more elegant. It will just mean, of course, that people will move to their phone sapien new lifestyle. I like that. I'm going to use that forever now. But it just means it just means that whereas people used to think, well, actually, I'm not going to use my mobile for that because it's a bit slow and kludgy. It won't be there. And most of the fact why things are slow and kludgy is not necessarily the app, especially obviously not the apps written by Mkodo, but it's actually the network connectivity is slow to establish, or in busy networks, etc. Those things will start to completely disappear when 5G starts to reach all the parts it needs to reach.
I tend to agree. So we're going to see an experience like you get at home, but on your mobile device, similar speeds, similar sort of low latencies. The other thing from an events or operator's perspective is the millions of devices per square kilometre. So that really changes, and it goes back to Stuart's point of tearing up and tearing down. If you're running a network in a stadium, you're going to see congestion. You have to put special parameters on your 4G or 3G network. You won't have that with 5G. So you can have interaction.
Wow.
60,000 seater sports stadium, interaction with the crowd and the game in a very, very different way than you could do over a 4G network. And imagine that pushed out across the entire country. So again, covering off the density issue in the cities and in micro environments from a city perspective, like a stadium where we've got tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people connected at the same time. Lower latency is going to help with interacting with the sport or game that's on in the stadium naturally. And again, that's going to look more like a fiber connection. It's not going to help you get any closer to your sportsbook provider. Their kit's still going to be in Malta, Gibraltar, Alderley, Guernsey, wherever the kit is. But it's going to look more like you're connected to it by fiber.
Fantastic. So it's really kind of the last mile sort of becomes invisible, and the servers are in Malta, Gibraltar, wherever, but your connection to those servers is lightning fast. I mean, that was Justin, staying with yourself. That was a really interesting example of the sports stadium, and that's of course a place where iGaming services could be, transformational in terms of having that speed, that quality of media, that instantaneous interaction. Talk to us a bit about how 5G looks in the wild, and what kind of other situations do we think that will be advantageous for the iGaming space when 5G is deployed and you have that density and that just, almost no latency with the interactions?
So right now, 5G is just pretty much 4G on steroids. It lives on a 4G core. It's got a different antenna system. So access network is many more, but the guts of it is a 4G plus network. In a few places around the world, we're going to see this in the next generation. So there's 4, 5, half a dozen standalone cores live. So what that means is that's when we're going to start to see a radical change in what we can do with 5G. So that's where the low latency really starts to come into play. At the moment, we're still around the sort of 30 milliseconds, but when we shave that down, we're going to be in a situation whereby a 5G network could run a platoon of trucks, no problem at all. I mean, wow. United Arab Emirates have just licensed pilotless drones to fly. That will be using 5G infrastructure, same as there's a pilotless 5G ferry in Sweden. So that low latency, the reason that's important and enables things like autonomous vehicles is the time it takes from the decision to say brake that's made by the bit of AI in the platform and the brakes actually being actuated. The latency dropped from say 30 milliseconds to 5 milliseconds. That means hundreds of meters of braking distance on the road, right? So what that means also is it gives us the ability to move our decisions closer to the place that the decisions are being made. So we're talking about compute on the edge of the network, building infrastructure really, really close to the antenna that are providing the signal to the device that's making the choices. So very, very important when it comes to vehicles, equally important when it comes to remote surgery. I mean, I'd be pretty keen that if my eye surgeon based in Harley Street and I'm here in Guernsey was performing a procedure, that whatever he or she was doing over there happened quite quickly, like instantaneously, whilst the scalpel's hovering around my eyeball. So there's that. Yeah. And like I say, this density is a very, very important thing. And I'm sure a little bit later on, we'll touch on security as well. Stuart mentioned the always on, no tear up, tear down. And the security is vastly improved in a 5G network in terms of that handshaking experience. Each generation of a mobile technology improves on that. So we've got to wait a little while. Not long. As I say, there's up to half a dozen commercial networks on a standalone core right now, which will have all these enhanced features. For the rest of us, we're going to get fiber-like connectivity today, so massively increased speeds and lower latency, but not as low as the standalone will be in the future.
Wow, but that's super interesting. The securities, I'd love to come back to that a bit later. Thank you, Justin. And coming over to yourself, Stuart, now, esports are obviously a very big deal at the moment. Streaming media is absolutely massive. It's just gone through the roof during the pandemic because everyone's been at home. Do you think that 5G could accelerate more integration between streaming media and esports into the iGaming space? And what do you think that might look like?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. It's going to esports is growing so greatly, it's huge. I mean, it's becoming one of the main markets. I think one of the other reasons why esports is growing so much is betting on sports is quite a conventional product. It also has a lot of barriers to entry, and we do quite a lot of work in the betting on sports type of arena. And the people who predominantly use betting on sports types of products are very familiar with betting on sports products. And you might say, well, yeah, of course. But that creates an innate barrier for people who haven't got familiarity with betting on sports. They come into these products and find these rather complex products, whereas esports are not like that. They're much more accessible and amenable to these people. They understand them. They come from that culture, and so that's one of the reasons why it's got huge growth. And again, it's heavily data driven. Anything that's data driven is going to just fall perfectly into a 5G world. And the other thing about esports, which obviously irritates me immensely as being an old person on the panel, is that esports is a younger person's, a younger demographic product set. And what do they invariably only have? They have probably a very expensive, but they only have a mobile phone. One of the things that we find when we do our research into demographic reach of our products that we produce for our clients is the amazing thing is that so many people do not have a personal compute device other than a mobile phone. It is quite remarkable. If you see the people coming out of universities, and you might find this absolutely astronomical to see this. It's a lot of people have a laptop which they hardly use, but most of their personal compute time is on a mobile phone. So anything, so not only do you need to make sure that your esports products and your whole iGaming products are mobile first, because that actually is where your major market is. We need the infrastructure to support that mobile first approach, which is why 5G, the evolution, if you like, of our mobile cellular networks is so crucially important to all businesses, irrespective of whether it's iGaming or whatever. But iGaming particularly is a very heavily data driven product set normally.
This is a really good point you made there as well with esports. Of course, the competitors are going to be extremely passionate about low latency, right? So that's going to be one of the frames per second, low latency, are the two massive metrics that matter most to the competitors. So whether that's at home, on the move, as you say, from mobile, or again, this comes back to the tournament in a hall, 5G will be ideal technology for that, for sure. So I was a bit skeptical about the richness of content. Being a bit of a cynic and being around through the era of multiple poker games going on at the same time for one individual, so the return on investment maximized because you've got loads of games on the go, to seeing like I don't know if you remember the PKR offering, so like the PlayStation offering where we've all got our own avatar and we can produce a tell when we look at our cards, and this really rich gaming atmosphere, really replicating the true poker experience. And that didn't get as much traction as it should have done because we just cared about playing the game, right? But making a living out of it rather than social. But it's interesting, Stuart, that we're seeing this change now in the way we consume and interact with content that we didn't see only 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm a bit of a techno geek, having worked in this space for a very long time. But one of the things I find really interesting is that 20 odd years ago, when you were trying to do any sort of outside broadcast, whether it's radio, TV, or whatever, you scrabbled around to try and find some sort of digital communications link to get you back to your audience, and invariably it was satellite. That's what you ended up having to use, and that's only just because you couldn't find anything to kind of plug your video camera into fundamentally, other than looking up at the sky. But what we're going to be seeing, one of the things that just for the audience, we were having a chat a few days ago about this, what we were saying here. One of the things that we started talking about was Coca-Cola machines. Other forms of drink are available, but Coca-Cola machines or vending machines were permanent. There's a number of them that are permanently connected, and they basically, they tell head office, I'm running out of Sprite or whatever. Send some now, or my power's been disconnected, or I'm raised in temperature and I need help. My drink is getting warm, type of thing. But where I'm going with this is that you will find, particularly with 5G, that you will buy product that already has that digital connectivity built into it. So you will find outside broadcast cameras, major broadcasters are already looking at this. How do they actually reduce their broadcast costs? Because if you've seen now, and in my family, we kind of joke about it that the major news broadcasters always seem to have a correspondent in the thick of it anywhere on the planet. They always seem to have a live broadcast there and then now, yeah? But how do they get that cost of broadcast down? And you might say, well, how does this relate to iGaming? Well, it's all about how do you get digital communications technology right to that person, and that's exactly what 5G will ultimately give us. You will find that product just innately has a digital connection. You don't have basically that digital connection is in all devices. You don't have to kind of Bluetooth it to your phone anymore and all that type of stuff. It will just have that digital connection ready to go.
And it's a little bit more than that. So
yes.
Not only will the product have its own digital connectivity, it'll have its own network, because with the technology enables us to, as a network operator, to slice our network for different applications. So the broadcast product will live on a different network slice to the car insurance product. So they can have their own dedicated virtual bit of the 5G network, specifically tailored for the application. Sorry, actually, I'll keep interrupting you.
That's so interesting. That's absolutely brilliant. I mean, I was going to, we've got about 2.5 minutes left. Time absolutely flies when you're having fun. You've kind of started to paint a picture there of the future for the iGaming sector in terms of 5G. Stuart, you mentioned the 5G replacing satellites. This is big news for lottery operators, etc. Of course, because they use satellite at the moment, they can shift over to 5G. Justin, you mentioned higher security there. I just wonder, super quickly, is there anything that folks should be aware in terms of, what else to look out for from the future, or anything? You mentioned privacy earlier and some security kind of concerns there, just to kind of put the icing on the 5G cake in terms of iGaming. Who'd like to jump in there first? Do you want to fire ahead, Stuart? Justin?
Yeah, one of the really exciting things we talked about is, so for those of you who are familiar with Apple Tag products, so these are little things that you can put on your key ring. They are using a really cool piece of technology, and they're basically leveraging everybody's Apple phone. They're creating something called a mesh network. So effectively, what we'll also be seeing, and what is already being talked about, is that, okay, I'm just at the edge, or I'm just outside a 5G network. However, within reasonable distance of me is somebody who has a similar mobile device who is on the 5G network. Can I piggyback off that guy to get onto the 5G network? And this is one of the really exciting things of this kind of technology, where we will be using mesh networking to extend the range of the cellular network. And I think that is really, really exciting. It goes kind of also back to the arena type of thing, whereas basically everybody's mobile phone becomes party to a complete network, and as we say, we call that mesh networking. And this is another piece of underlying kind of protocol that 5G will help to support. So we will see people's phones anonymously collaborating with one another to get data transfer.
Wow, fantastic. Okay, we've got 30 seconds left. Justin, the stage is yours. What do you see for the future? What is, one or two things that the folks should absolutely take away?
So right now, 5G, straight fiber broadband replacement very, very soon. All that amazing stuff like the mesh network, the extremely low latency, subconscious for the change that will make for sportsbook in particular, low latency right now. Again, the multi-devices per stadium. Think of the content you can produce. Think of applications the live applications you can have in that sort of environment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. Yeah, I had a great session about live yesterday, which is going to be available on demand. So I'm so sorry, but we've totally run out of time. We had a nice question there. We'll answer it offline. I just remains to thank so much Stuart Godfree, Managing Director at Mkodo. Thank you so much, Stuart.
It's been my pleasure,
Justin
guys.
Bellinger, the Chief Digital Officer, Assurance National. Thank you so much. My name's Oisin Lunny. Please, let's connect online on LinkedIn, build the iGaming Next online global family. Thank you for joining us.
Cheers, guys.